Hello and welcome to our fourth episode of Issues, where we at Volunteer Maine take a look at how service and volunteerism can help to solve some of Maine's largest challenges. My name is Brian Roach, Communications Officer for Volunteer Maine. Thanks again for coming back, and back with us again is my pretty much co-host, Kelsey Priest. Kelsey is planning the Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference that we're going to talk a lot about in this month's episode. She's also our program officer for volunteer sector initiatives. Thanks for coming back. I'm glad you're not sick of this yet.
No, you can't get rid of me.
I like having a co-host. It's nice. It makes it easier. But we'll bring Kelsey back in just a quick second, because as you folks know, with this show, 3 episodes in now with our 4th, we like to take a look at a certain issue and how it relates to the volunteerism and service sectors in the state of Maine. And kind of continuing the conversation from last month's episode, where we took a deep dive into the report around the results of the survey we administered with the Cutler Institute and the Muskie School of Public Service at the University of Southern Maine, their data innovation project, that really took a look at the impact the pandemic had on nonprofits, volunteer management, volunteer programs. So with that in mind, and when really thinking about, the goal of the Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference, we're going to really focus on the resource gap. Now, we know that resource gap has existed before, but how the pandemic has helped to really amplify that. And you'll actually hear a little more about that in one of our later interviews. But we wanted to take this opportunity not only to introduce you to some of the experts who will be presenting during the conference, but really get each of their opinion on how their certain presentation, their area of expertise, their takeaways from their sessions can help volunteer managers, leaders, administrators help to overcome this amplified resource gap that we're facing coming out of the pandemic. And you'll also hear this mentioned a couple of times during the episode as well, but when talking about resources, we're also looking at it as a skill. So with that being said, we'll bring in Kelsey once more. And Kelsey, I know you have been the leader of the charge when it comes to planning this conference this year. It's going to be virtual again on October 12th. At a high level, can you tell some folks a few details about this year's Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference?
Yeah, sure. We've got a lot of great speakers in a lot of different areas, and the hope is that, anybody in this area, no matter if you are a well-seasoned volunteer manager or somebody who doesn't consider yourself a volunteer manager, but maybe you happen to work with volunteers in your program, you're going to get something out of this conference. There's going to be a skill that you learn, something that you can find here that will be really helpful for you and for your volunteer program at your organization.
Thank you. And I've been a part of 2 of these. This will be my 3rd since joining Volunteer Maine in 2019, both the one in-person version I got to go to. Hopefully next year we'll be back there, some kind of hybrid format. And of course, last year's first foray into the virtual world. And in both settings, truly is a conference where someone just getting involved into the field can really gain a lot of knowledge. I know it's helped me with a lot of my communications work, some of the strategies and information that I've picked up, and even had a chance to present last year, which, I think could have gone a little better if I wasn't up early in the morning helping to run tech the whole day. So anyone who went last year and saw my presentation, I'm sorry. We'll get it better. Maybe next year. But this year,
now you have to come back next year and
I think I put myself in a little bit of a
redeem
corner
yourself
there. I have a habit of challenging myself that way, but one challenge we don't need is to tell you who's going to be on our show this month. So in the order of appearance, we're delighted to be able to bring you our keynote speaker, TJ Holloway, president of the Holloway Group, LLC. We'll also be hearing from Alina, Wright, individual assistance officer and a duty officer for the Maine Emergency Management Agency, or MEMA, as folks around here know it. Margaret Brownlee, the first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at the Maine College of Art and Design. She's also a learning support coordinator there. She'll be speaking about her session. And finally, Jared McCannell, certified volunteer administrator and the executive director of the Penobscot Bay Language School. So without wasting any more time, let's dive right into our interviews. First, kicking it off with TJ Holloway. All right, and we have our first guest with us on our Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference preview episode of Issues, and it is our keynote speaker. He's the president of the Holloway Group, LLC. His keynote is called Greatness is in You. I'd like to welcome on to Issues, TJ Holloway. TJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very awesome to be here with you.
And thank you too for, of course, accepting the offer to be our keynote speaker this year for the conference. We're excited to have you, our second year in a virtual setting. So, and we know just from talking right before we recorded, it sounds like you're doing a lot of virtual work right now yourself still, as we're speaking at the end of September.
Right, tons of it, tons of virtual things. And it's actually added a lot to a lot of myself and my colleagues' repertoire, like essentially everything that you do now. Now you also have a virtual version that you can add to your menu. So one of the byproducts that can be added as a result of the pandemic.
And of course, while we are interviewing in an online setting, folks will see that conference organizer Kelsey Priest is joining us here in the interview as well. She'll be with us for all the interviews. So thanks for dropping in too, Kelsey. So let's not waste any more time, because I know I am just about ready to go off on several tangents. TJ, could you give us some details, or give the audience some details, a little bit about your background?
My background. So I am not a native Mainer, but I love Maine. Like this is definitely where my wife and I, we made a definitive decision to homestead right here in this wonderful and great state. I'm from North Carolina. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina. Lived there all of my young adult life. I went to Pfeiffer University. You probably never heard of Pfeiffer University.
Have not.
It's fairly small, but I would say prestigious liberal arts university, where I got a degree in business communication. And I stayed in North Carolina for a little bit after graduation, and I wound up moving to Maine at the behest of a frat brother and friend of mine. And I lived in Portland for a number of years until I heard of Husson University, and they were looking to hire somebody as a resident director. So I said, you know what? If I go and work at the university, I could probably take some classes too. So that's exactly what I did, and I got my master's degree from Husson. Fell in love with the university. I love Husson University with all my heart. My students, absolutely fantastic. And this is where I live. This is where it's at for me, for life. Aside, started working as which a lot of people in my profession do. You spend a lot of time in the classroom with students, and over time you do a lot of research and kind of become an expert on some part of your craft. And mine was really leadership, which I'm now working on a doctoral degree at Liberty University on executive leadership. I'm using that work every day, working with awesome small businesses and corporate businesses right here in Maine. Pretty much the New England region is my I got a couple outside of New England, but mostly New England is my territory. And that's what takes up my time. So working in occupation, in industry, also working with students, which, man, I need them way more than they need me. They really give me life. And when I'm not, at work or with my students, and I'm with my beautiful wife, Brianne, we've been married for 11 years now. My oldest child is my daughter, Graceland, who's 13. That's my baby girl. My middle child is Jace. He's my superstar athlete right now. Good football player, soccer player, basketball player, hockey player. He does it all. And then I got my baby son, who, man, time is flying. He's 4 years old. He's Jackson. He just started pre-K this year, and he's playing a little soccer himself, doing really good. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. How I started and what my journey was, and how I got to be where I am right now.
Well, thank you for that, TJ. And that actually, going back to one of the first things you said, that makes three of us each of us are not from Maine, but we've all fallen in love with it. So
Absolutely.
that's always great to hear. And myself too, I ended up in Portland right after a little stint in Ormond. So it feels like Kelsey hasn't yet. I know you have family there, but it feels like everyone ends up in Portland just for a little bit of time. But before I can ramble on about Maine, which also is another tangent I can go on, greatness is in you. That's the name of the keynote. Could you tell us a little more about it, TJ?
Oh man, you're gonna make me give it all away. But
just a tease, just a tease.
I think I can give you a little teeny weeny piece.
All right.
Anybody who's been to one of our seminars or workshops, they know my underlying message. My underlying message is always about peace and love and self-awareness. And I think a lot of times we don't really understand just how great and resilient that we are. We do this thing, we spend so much time evaluating the people who are around us and seeing the greatness in everybody who's around us, but we only see our flaws. One of the things you might have heard me say in our emotional intelligence seminar, the second called you got to focus on what you're packing, not what you're lacking. Right. And I think that's just a great way of really focusing on the positives that you have. And greatness is already in you. And that's the thing that we have to understand. We are born to be great. We are born with greatness. It's not something that we have to go out and achieve. Oftentimes it's just something that we have to realize, right? Not go do, nothing you need to go do, nothing you need to go get. Something you have to realize is already inside of you. And the people who are able to realize it, are able to actualize it, are able to use it, and to really, transcend the greatness that's in them out onto the world and create greatness in other places, other situations, and in other people. So I'm really excited to bring that message to volunteers and volunteer managers, because oftentimes it is somewhat of a thankless job, a job that you do, you wear a ton of hats, you do a lot of it all by yourself. And it's easy when you get by yourself to let, these 6 inches begin to take over. And I don't know about you, but, this is a dangerous place to be all by yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Negativity can very easily creep in, and you begin to believe some of those negative thoughts, which we can't stop. I'll talk about that in the seminar. We can't stop those negative thoughts, but we can remember who we are, and we can remember that greatness already lives inside of us. We can remember that we are resilient. And I'm going to give people a couple of tools and tricks and mantras that they can hide in their hearts, and they can put in safe places to stay in constant, to be constantly reminded that greatness already lives in them, which is just another well to draw from.
Well, I think especially after coming out of a pandemic, like you said, for a volunteer manager, it is a thankless job a lot of the times. And having, just having the tools to have a positive mindset can go so far. And I think, you've already kind of touched on our third and final question, and thank you so much for that, which would have been, and I'm going to change that just a little bit. What do you hope that folks will get out of your session? I think we covered that in your last answer. So, and I know we were talking about this before we started recording. Let me throw a little wrinkle in here. So with all that being said, one of the issues that, we're looking at on the whole for this episode, and really with the conference itself, is how to overcome this resource gap that has emerged in the field after the pandemic. And again, we will refer to the study that we did with the Muskie School. We'll put a link in the bio of our episode from last month so you folks can check it out. But just to reset that, TJ, how do you think your session can help volunteer managers, volunteer programs overcome at a large level this resource gap that is emerged after the pandemic?
Confidence. Anything you do with self-confidence. I was having this conversation with my son and my nephew getting ready to go play their first football game last week. And we just ask them a very simple question. You gonna win? Well, I don't know. They got some awful big guys. But hey, listen, if you go in there thinking about that, then no, you're not gonna win. You need to go into everything that you intend to do with greatness. You need to go into it with a good degree of confidence and a good degree of self-belief. It's infectious. When we possess self-confidence, really there's not much we can achieve. I tell my students here at the university all the time, if you use your mind and you use your energy and you never quit, you will find success. Think about it, right? If you always use your mind, you always use your energy to do something about the things that you think about. Nothing changes till we do something. And you never quit, never give up, right? Then I have no problems with where you are, because I know you're eventually going to find a success that you're looking for. So the way that I think a volunteer manager can use the outcome of this time that we're going to spend together is to gain confidence in their abilities, to see themselves in what I would say is the right way, right? To see themselves as the leaders that they are, to recognize what it is that they give to the world. Know that it's not always going to be easy, but they should never quit, because what they're bringing to the world is absolutely something that the world needs. They're bringing a level of help, a level of love, to the world, which is exactly, if you look at the etymology of the word volunteer, that's exactly what it speaks to. I talk to my college students about volunteering as being even more important than occupation. You should put volunteerism on your resume. My father taught me about volunteerism. I was when I was 17. My dad ran a business. I used to have to get off the school bus at my dad's business because nobody was home, and he had somebody coming in for a job interview. And he told me it was the way the building was set up. You could see outside of the building, but it was a mirror on the outside, so people couldn't see in. So he saw his interviewee driving up, and the guy got out, prepped his hair in his little rearview mirror or whatnot. And my dad told me, "Okay, go back in the other room and finish up your homework. I got to do this interview. Make sure you're quiet." So okay, so I started gathering up my stuff. But we watched this guy get out of his vehicle and start walking up toward the building. And as he walked up toward the building, he just bent over, picked up a brown paper bag that was on the ground, balled it up, and threw it in the trash can. My dad said to me, "I'm going to hire him. I'm going to hire him." And the reason why is because he did something that he didn't have to do. I tell my students here, everybody's got to go to class. If you want a degree, you got to go to class. But what about the things that you didn't have to do? What things are you doing that you don't have to do, right? So the spirit of volunteerism, right? The spirit of doing something voluntarily. Nobody made you do it, but you saw fit to do something that the world needed to be done. That's leadership, right? And that's love. And that's taking a situation that is status quo or less and making it better. What if everybody possessed that spirit? That's the world that we should be living in. So my heart really goes out to volunteers, volunteer managers, because at the end of the day, if we really look at what the job description is make the world a better place. And that's exactly what they do. So I just want to speak life into it. I want to let them know that what they do, even though sometimes it's thankless, it's just because they can't always hear the thank yous that are out there and always see the effects of and the outcomes of what it is that they bring to the world. So that's the outcome that I want for people. Those are the learning outcomes that I want for people who attend this time that we spend together.
Thank you so much, TJ. And
I need a weekly check-in with TJ to hype me up, to keep me focused. That's what I need. That was great.
Yes.
Anytime. Happy.
Well, no, I think that is a fantastic place to end at least this portion of the episode, because that message of peace, love, and confidence is something that yeah, volunteer managers need, but I think it's something we could all use, especially today. So TJ Holloway, thank you so much. Again, the session will be called Greatness is in You. It is the keynote for the 2021 Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference. TJ, thanks again for taking the time, and truthfully, really looking forward to hearing your session in a couple weeks.
Awesome. Very awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Kelsey, for having me.
Thank you.
We have our second guest here on our Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference preview episode. She is the individual assistance officer and a duty officer with the Maine Emergency Management Agency. I'd like to welcome in Alina Wright. Alina, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. And we also have Kelsey back again, of course, our conference planning guru who's hanging out with us during the interviews. I'm going to call you a guru. You've jumped right into this. And
I appreciate that. Hopefully I'll live up to the hype.
Hey, I think so. Based off our first conversation, I think we're already 1 for 1 on guests. And of course, our office does a lot of work with MEMA, especially in the past year and a half with the pandemic, part of the donations coordination team. Of course, Michael Ashmore in our office leads that up. Another one of our presenters during the conference. Give Michael a quick little plug, but not to stray too far. Alina, let's jump right into it because your session is going to focus on disaster preparedness. But first, before we get into that, just wanted to ask you a little bit about your background. Let the folks at home know. Who is Alina Wright with MEMA?
Awesome. Yeah. So I've been in the state government since about 2012. After I graduated college, I started as a contractor, kind of had some emergency planning thrown my way in that position, realized that I am a decent planner and that I enjoyed planning, especially around disasters and safety and keeping people safe. So I started doing continuity of operations planning for Maine Revenue Services back in probably 2015. And I've been in emergency management since then. I came to MEMA about 4 years ago now, and I've been here since then. And I work with individuals and families, helping to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. I also work with our voluntary organizations through the Maine Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, which is VOAD, and help them connect with survivors to kind of bridge those gaps. But in addition to that, I'm also the agency continuity program lead. So I help run the continuity of operations program and do training on continuity of operations and how to continue during a disaster for those community organizations that have service missions.
And that is a whole heck of a lot to throw into one job title there. But with that being said, I think it provides, or what we've learned from your background is that you're the right person to bring in to talk about disaster preparedness. So tell us a little bit about your session.
Yeah, I'm really excited. The session is called Open. It's Organizations Preparing for Emergency Needs. I did not write this curriculum. It's something that the Federal Emergency Management Agency put together as an opportunity for non-government types to learn a little bit more about preparing for disasters. Because again, where you have a service mission, you need to make sure you can continue that mission when people need you the most, which is during a disaster event. So that's what the program is on. We've picked a couple of the focus areas to really hone in on. Kelsey and Michael helped with that. And we'll be talking about some different preparedness activities that community-based organizations can take to kind of build up their own resilience so that they can then help other people prepare.
And speaking about needs, of course, our larger focus beyond promoting the conference and letting folks have a little preview to some of the speakers and sessions that are available is thinking about the overall resource gap, which includes skills caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that in mind, what do you think and what do you hope that folks can get out of your session?
I think the biggest consideration is that emergency preparedness doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of situation. It's not, you don't have to go for 100% off the bat. There's always steps you can take to become better prepared, to help your organization be more resilient and to better serve the public without having to dedicate time and resources that you don't necessarily have in a small community-based organization. So hopefully this program will make it accessible for everyone to realize that there are steps they can take in their organizations to become more resilient and better prepared.
And of course, we are recording at the end of September. It is the 28th. And of course, September is Emergency Preparedness Month. So perfect time to have this conversation. At least for me, I can check another box on social media and say we have one of those conversations or we have something to share beyond some of the other resources that we have. But seriously, Alina, thank you so much for taking the time. I know folks are going to enjoy this session. Again, I know we haven't worked closely, but I've heard a ton of great things about you, your office, and how much you can bring to the disaster preparedness table. So I think folks are going to enjoy it. And thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you.
We have 2 interviews down, 2 of our previews down, 2 more to go. And I'm delighted to bring in our 3rd guest and someone we actually got to see couple weeks ago during our annual commission retreat. She is the first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at the Maine College of Art and Design. And she's also a learning support coordinator on staff. Margaret Brownlee, thank you so much for joining in, being willing to present at the conference, and of course, continuing to hang out with us here at Volunteer Maine, as we had you at the retreat a couple of weeks ago, as we said, and it was just absolutely fantastic. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we have Kelsey back with us. And Margaret, we'll just start off with some details about yourself. Can you give us, the folks at home some information on your background?
Sure. So yeah, my title is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer here at Maine College of Art and Design. I provide workshops and trainings to students, faculty, and staff. I organize events and support the community. In my spare time, I volunteer on the South Portland Human Rights Commission, which is about a year old now. I'm also running for city council in South Portland, and lots going on. I'm also in my final year of school at the University of New England. So super busy, but also super passionate about the work that I do.
That's awesome. And you're, what is it? It's your doctorate in educational leadership. That's what you're going for? Of course, we wish you the best of luck as you finish that up. So question number 2, of course, give us a little sneak peek about your session.
I am piggybacking off of some of the work that I did in the commissioner retreat, talking about DEI basic principles so that we are all on the same page about what those terms mean. And then I'm also going to be talking a little bit about how we can work with our different communities to understand where they're coming from, understanding how to do community needs assessments, and then also understanding how access and equity create inclusion, and that we can create these different principles to create a more inclusive community. So I'll be talking about a little bit about power and privilege, intersectionality, and strategies for success. So I'm really excited to be hosting or kicking it off for you all, and that I hope that the principles and resources are helpful for the audience.
And speaking of the audience, what we've been asking folks so far in this episode is, taking it back to the larger theme of this month's episode, which is finding ways to shrink the resource gap, including skills. We're looking at that as a resource brought on by the pandemic that has just hit nonprofits, volunteer agencies, volunteer managers so hard. The conference, we want to use that as, just one way to provide folks with some tools to help shrink that and combat that. So with that being said, what do you hope that people get out of your session?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think oftentimes DEI is a one-on-one conversation over and over again. We start to talk about the same exact principles. And so I'm hoping that we can lean on other aspects of DEI, and access is one of them, right? So talking about ways that we can all have a piece of the pie or a piece of the puzzle, that we can all be collaborative to work towards success. I also feel like I'm actually looking at my slides to make sure I'm relaying the correct information. But I think with the resource gap, it's important to think about maximizing our efficiency, right? So oftentimes I talk about doing SWOT analysis within organizations. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So how can we rely on technology to be more efficient, right? Because there's not going to be an influx of people, right? And so how can we utilize the people and the resources that we already have to work smarter, not harder? So my takeaway from the training, I think, obviously we'll be going over the basic principles and terminologies, best practices, but finding ways that Volunteer Maine can maximize their efficiency, right? Kind of using a paradigm shift about ways that I don't want to add to people's caseloads, right? I don't want to add more work and more time and like longer, harder hours, but how can we work smarter with the amount of people, resources, diversity of perspectives and thoughts that we already have?
Well, thank you so much, Margaret. And again, just having the opportunity to sit in on the commission retreat, I think folks are really going to enjoy your session. There was a lot for me to take away in it, and I'm excited. I think, Kelsey, if correct me if I'm wrong, I think I signed up. Actually, yes, I did sign up to be the tech for your session, so I'm going to be there no matter what. No, it truly is a eye-opening session, at least what we got to see. And as someone who is in communications and in recruitment as well here for Volunteer Maine, having a hand in that for some of the national service programs and some of the new service corps that we have coming up, this is vital information for me. So I thank you, and I hope folks will choose to attend the session. I can at least say too that it's going to be run really well because I'm on the tech. But no, seriously, Margaret is an awesome speaker. Sign up for the session, and please join us on October 12th. So, Margaret, thank you so much. Kelsey, thank you again for sitting in on another interview with us. And we'll be back in just a few moments with Jared McCannell. And finally, we have our final preview for the 2021 Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference as we continue to investigate the issue of how to shrink the resource gap facing volunteer managers, administrators, programs in Maine after the COVID-19 pandemic. Want to bring in Jared McCannell, a certified volunteer administrator, executive director of the Penobscot Bay Language School, and all-around friend of Volunteer Maine and the Maine Commission for Community Service. Jared, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. And let's just jump right into it. So we know a little bit about your background, but for the folks at home, could you share some details, please?
Sure. Well, my name is Jared McCannell. I grew up in Maine, and then after going through school a little bit, I decided to move to California and study Spanish. Maine wasn't the right place to do that at the time. And when I was out there, while working and going to college, I got involved with a nonprofit called Hosteling International. And this was a great fit for me at the time. It was, something I could do at first at nights while I was going to school. But then they offered me an opportunity to be a volunteer and activities coordinator. And that was in 2006. Now, I had worked with volunteers before that, various roles in different organizations, but, very small time stuff. This was the first time I really had an opportunity to build a program from scratch by myself, not that I did it by myself, obviously, but I was in charge of it, sorry. And right off the bat, I was paired with this wonderful person. She became my mentor, Jill Friedman Fixler, who literally wrote the book on boomer volunteer engagement. And that was the start of my professional career in volunteer management. And I couldn't have had a better start. Hosteling International gave me the space to create the sort of program I wanted to do. We engaged volunteers and working with international travelers and took people from all around San Diego, looking at different cultural venues and tours and activities, but also over to Tijuana, Mexico, which brought back in my interest in Spanish language. That's why I'd originally gone to San Diego. And so shortly after I graduated from San Diego State University, I decided that volunteer management was absolutely, my career moving forward. So I recently got a Spanish degree and then decided to go in a different path. Many years later, with several different jobs under my belt, lots of consulting and other things, I was offered the opportunity to be the executive director at Penobscot Bay Language School, which for me really brought back, my two interests: that nonprofit management experience and program experience on one side, professionally, and then I had that academic and personal background in Spanish and language interests. So coming here, it was just a full circle sort of situation. I moved back to Maine, started raising my family, found myself here, and I couldn't be happier with the way my path has brought me here at this point. I know there's a road ahead for sure, but and of course, this recent pandemic, or the current pandemic, has certainly offered some challenges, during this time and everything. But personally, I just couldn't be happier with where I am right now. And I think a lot of folks don't have that opportunity, and I hope they can achieve that.
Now, it's certainly awesome to hear, especially, just how the pandemic upended life in general. But fittingly enough, with all your experience in volunteer management, nonprofit management, your session, Volunteer Management 101, is going to be one of the early ones offered during the conference. Could you tell us a little bit about the session?
Sure. I've done lots of training around the country. Volunteer Management 101 is the only training I will do now when it comes to volunteer management, because in all the years I've worked in volunteer management, the basics have never really changed. Now, obviously, the industry has changed. Society has changed. All kinds of factors. We've had different, presidents who supported or didn't support, or, were apathetic. And with all of that, with all the fads coming and going of how to manage people, not in volunteer management, but in general, it comes right down to it. You need to know who is doing what, when, and sometimes where, if you don't have a fixed location. And so when you build a training on that, and you really take people back to the basics, but then give them the tools, give them a snapshot of the volunteer management process. That's real important, because you might be great with people, you might be great at organizing, but there's definitely a tried and true process. Now, it's not linear necessarily. It can be very fluid. It can be very complex, or what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Blanking on.
Yeah, no worries.
Doesn't matter. But there has to be an understanding of the very basics, of how to plan a program, start to recruit for that program, how to onboard people, what that includes, whether it's interviewing, training, orientation, so on and so forth. And then the hard part is, once you got them, how do you supervise them? How do you keep them involved? How do you keep them engaged? Those are the things that people absolutely need from the get-go. And I find I love teaching that seminar, and I will, do other seminars at some point. But this one right now, I think it's just so important, especially when volunteer management is suffering with this resource crunch. The folks that we bring into the field need to have a solid foundation in how to do it. And it's also part of being a CVA, is advocating for the sector, advocating for the profession. I take that very seriously. I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't have the opportunity to become a volunteer coordinator, have a great mentor with Jill, and continue on to be able to pursue the other things I liked in life, like language and culture.
And you mentioned the resource gap that we've been talking about this whole episode and in our conference preview. So wanted to ask this as well. And when thinking about that resource gap, which includes skills that's been caused by the pandemic, what do you hope that people will get out of your session? Sure.
This is going to sound cliche. I'm glad you asked that. The one big update I've made to my presentation, and keep in mind that the basics haven't changed. My presentation has been updated, modernized, and has funnier jokes in it, so on and so forth. But one thing I've added, one of the first things I've really changed about it is when you get to the community involvement aspect of volunteer management, meaning you're pulling your volunteers in from the community, you're serving the community, you're measuring their need, or identifying need and helping to address it. One part of the community we often forget about are the other nonprofits, right, that we work with, our colleagues. And yeah, we have conferences like this, and it's great to get people together. But when it comes to the skills gap, volunteer managers are each other's best resource always, period, right? And so starting up groups like, Dovia or VAN, directors of volunteers and agencies, or volunteer administrator networks, or, all the different types of professional groups. And I'll be the first to admit, this isn't an easy thing to necessarily do. You can't live in a silo and have a volunteer managers group. I know that for a fact, because I've tried to start a few over the years. And what it comes down to is, you need a group of people who are not there just to check a box, oh, I've done professional development, but are there to contribute to a greater community of volunteer managers, a greater community of volunteer engagement. I've learned more from other volunteer managers than I've ever learned from any other resource. And so as far as the skills gap go, I'm going to be encouraging people to seek those groups. And if they can't find one in their area, start one. Contact the Maine Commission for Community Service, contact Volunteer Maine, contact me. We've myself and a couple of different people, around the state have certainly tried to get some of these groups off the ground. And when people show up, they're awesome. The problem was, as a private individual, not part of my organization, starting, this sort of peer group is difficult. I certainly tried with the Greater Waterville Area Volunteer Administrators, or GWAVA, as it was called, as part of the Mid-Coast group, and then of course PAVA down in Portland. These groups are super important, but they have this kind of up and down thing going. And if we could get that more consistent, if we could get people to commit to being part of the profession, not just having a job in volunteer management, I think that would fill that resource gap quicker than any other, thing you could throw at it. But like I said, it's hard, and when I tried to start GWAVA, and at first it was great. I talked to local volunteer managers. I roped in a few friends. We had Colby in the area. I lived in Winslow at the time. And it was great at first when it was in person. It just didn't translate online with the pandemic. And it can. I know that also for a fact, because our language classes here at Penobscot Bay Language School translated, to an online format. So I know instruction can be done online, or peer groups, discussion groups. But it comes down to, I didn't necessarily have the reach to connect with everyone in the area. And so that's an area that perhaps, a statewide agency could help be that kind of middleman to connect those resources. And I'm not suggesting that Volunteer Maine hasn't tried that. I mean, I know GWAVA has been on the website, the Mid-Coast Maine group, PAVA, it's there. But we still have that's part of the resource gap that I think we can fill. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, what a transition for me, because that is definitely actually something that is in the works to be launched soon. So a statewide volunteer managers network with volunteer managers and them teaching each other, basically. Yes. So you're right on the nose, Jared.
Sign me up.
I'll call you.
Yeah. And quite honestly, I'd be happy to kind of reboot GWAVA and Volunteer Administrators of Mid-Coast Maine, VAM is I kept on saying the Mid-Coast group. I'm sorry, I blanked on the name for a second. But, we have some groups that are kind of defunct right now, but they have Facebook pages. They have people behind them that, want to get them off the ground again, but have just had a hard time. So please, Sue Hathorne, reach out to her, reach out to me when you're doing this. I'd love to get something like GWAVA going again.
Awesome. We're on it.
Great.
Well,
I'm sorry, to answer the question, towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk about that community engagement and connecting with your peers. That's my contribution to the resource gap.
Well, no, and we're lucky to have you as a resource, Jared. I think it's going to be a fantastic session. And I just also have to say, it is every internal branding content manager's dream to have some form of breaking news on an internal piece of content, and we just got that. So a bonus. That's awesome. But seriously, we figure that you'll be involved in some capacity with that network. And I know Kelsey's doing a lot of work behind the scenes on that. So keep an eye out on our website for more information on that. And of course, on our website too is where you can find all the information about our speakers, about the sessions, and of course, to register for the conference if you haven't done so yet. But thank you so much, Jared, for taking the time. This was great. And I really think, especially your answer around the resource gap caused by the pandemic, I really think, and I really hope that will open some folks' eyes on the importance of volunteer management to help solve this. So thank you again.
Brian, and you're welcome. And I'd like to tag one thing. I know you're wrapping up. That resource gap existed before the pandemic. The pandemic, I think, amplified or magnified it. And I'm only saying that because I'm playing the long game here.
Oh yeah. No, but, that's a fantastic point.
Yeah, that's all. I just wanted to throw that in there. I really appreciate what you guys do. Please say hi to Michael, Mary Alice, and everyone else, on the commission and then the foundation. I miss you guys. I enjoyed working with you in the past, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you in this capacity.
Well, you can't drop a bomb like that and then say that you miss it. Like, you're coming back, my guy. You're coming in.
Well, I told you I'm a lifer here now, so yeah. Well, thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thank you again, Jared McCannell. And again, as we said, volunteermaine.gov, that's where you can find all the information on the session. So Kelsey and I will be back to wrap this up in just a few moments.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Not only Jared, but TJ Holloway, our keynote speaker, Alina Wright from MEMA, and Margaret Brownlee from Maine College of Art and Design for taking the time to just preview their session and give folks a little look into their background and their professional work and why you should go see each of their sessions. We know that they're going to be great, and I hope that you folks will feel the same too. So Kelsey, I know registration is still open. This will be publishing on the 30th of September. So folks will still have, up until the 7th this year, the 8th?
8th, yeah.
And they can find that on our website at volunteermaine.gov.
Mm-hmm. Just go to volunteermaine.gov, and it's right on that homepage. You can click and get more information on the conference and get registered. Awesome. And again, we want to mention it too. It might not be applicable by the time the episode releases. We're finishing up recording here on the 29th. Run to that registration to get some free gift box from Cabot Creamery Cooperative. They are our sponsor and been a big supporter for a long time. And they you register and you can get a free, sent directly to you, gift box of cheese and recipes straight from Cabot Creamery Cooperative. Thanks, Cabot. Yeah, Cabot's been a long time supporter. We want to thank them so much. And we know that especially last year, our first time doing the virtual conference, folks really appreciated that. So we hope you'll jump on that as well. But Kelsey, thank you again for sitting in with us on another episode of Issues. Thank you. I am not quite ready to tease next month's episode. I have a good idea, but I do think that we might be bringing in another member of the team over Kelsey, but don't worry, we'll get back in the planning room and we'll find more co-host opportunities. You can't get rid of me. I'll be around. Literally, our office, our cubicles, our cubicles are 40 feet apart, so it is impossible. Yes. But with all that being said, thanks again, Kelsey. Thanks again to our guests. And thank you for tuning in. Once again, I'll mention we'd love to hear some feedback now with 4 episodes in the books of Issues. Our episode next month, I can tell you, we'll be coming back to our traditional format where we won't be breaking things up as much. But we're trying to figure out, speaking of resources, if we want to dedicate the resources to also make Issues a podcast beyond a YouTube series. So let us know. Let us know what you think. Questions, comments, suggestions. Share it as well, please. Help spread the word. We're having a lot of fun doing this. We know our commissioners are enjoying it. We know some folks in our network are enjoying it. And we'd love to bring it to some more folks in the future. So with all that being said, again, my name is Brian Roach, Communications Officer for Volunteer Maine. This has been the September episode of Issues. We hope to see you at the conference. And if not,
even though we really hope that we will see you at the conference, really hope, we'll see you next month for our 5th episode. Thanks again, everyone.